In a city washed by endless rain, two women find each other in fleeting moments of warmth, one haunted by a love she cannot forget, the other seeking a home in a heart that seems unreachable. Their connection is fierce, tender, and impossible. But some loves are not meant to last, they are meant to burn, leaving only memory in their wake. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight. Not the kind that passes through, this was the kind that settled, soaked, and stayed. It blurred the city into watercolor, smearing light and shadow until everything looked like memory. Inside the small cafe on the corner of Wren Street, Mara sat by the fogged window. The steam from her coffee had long faded, leaving the cup lukewarm and untouched. She wasn't waiting for anyone, not really. She told herself she came for the quiet, but the truth was, she stayed because the silence here was different. It hummed with the soft clatter of cups, the murmur of lives she wasn't part of, and the constant, patient whisper of rain. She was 34. A night nurse at St. Hilary's Hospital, long hours, fluorescent lights, too many goodbyes. The world at night was her rhythm, half-awake faces, antiseptic smells, heart monitors that kept time better than clocks. In the mornings, she came here, not to rest, but to remember that the world still had ordinary things, coffee, windows, strangers. It was on one of those gray mornings that she saw her. Across the street, under a red umbrella, stood a woman, still, elegant, unmoving in the rain. She wasn't rushing for shelter, just standing there, as if she were waiting for something invisible to change. Her coat was long, dark, and her hair was tied loosely at the back, strands clinging to her cheek. Even from that distance, even through the blur of rain and glass, Mara felt something. Recognition, maybe. Or the ache of seeing beauty when you least expect it. The woman looked up. For a single, breathless second, their eyes met, through glass, rain, and silence. And then the light changed. The woman crossed the street, her red umbrella tilting slightly, and walked past the cafe without looking back. Mara didn't move for a long time. The rain continued its endless song against the window. And though she couldn't explain why, she felt as if something inside her had shifted, a small, invisible door opening somewhere she didn't know existed. That night, Mara returned to the hospital. The corridors were quiet, filled with the low hum of machines and the soft squeak of her shoes on polished floors. She moved like someone sleepwalking, her thoughts elsewhere, at the cafe, at the rain, at the woman with the red umbrella. "Long shift again?" a voice asked behind her. It was Clara, another nurse, young and cheerful in the way that people who still believed in happy endings often were. "Yeah," Mara said, forcing a smile. "I don't really sleep anymore." Clara grinned. "Maybe you need someone to tire you out differently." Mara laughed softly, shaking her head. "Maybe." But when she looked out the window, rain streaking the glass, she thought only of the stranger, her stillness, her eyes. The next morning, Mara returned to the cafe, almost without meaning to. It was early, quiet, dim, the smell of roasted beans heavy in the air. She ordered the same thing she always did, black coffee, no sugar. When she turned, she froze. There she was, the woman with the red umbrella, now without it. Her hair was damp, curling slightly at the edges. She sat in the far corner, a small notebook open before her, her fingers tracing words instead of writing them. For a moment, Mara just stood there. Then, as if drawn by something unseen, she walked over. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked softly. The woman looked up, her eyes gray, steady, unreadable. Then she nodded. Mara sat down. Neither spoke for a while. The sound of rain filled the space between them. "I saw you yesterday," Mara finally said. "Across the street." The woman smiled faintly. "I know. You were watching me." Mara flushed. "I didn't mean to. I didn't say it was a bad thing." Her voice was calm, low, the kind that could make even silence sound deliberate. "Elise," she said after a moment. "That's my name." "Mara." They shook hands, a touch that lingered a second too long. Elise's fingers were cold. Over the next few days, they met again and again. At first by chance, then by quiet intention. Always in the same cafe, always with rain outside. Elise told her she was a pianist, once well known, once loved for the way her music made people cry. But something had happened. A woman, she said. A love that had taken everything and left her hollow. Music stopped meaning anything after she left, Elise said one morning, stirring her tea without drinking it. When you lose someone like that, even beauty feels cruel. Mara didn't ask for details. Some griefs didn't want an audience. But she listened, really listened, and Elise, perhaps sensing that, began to talk more. Mara told her about her work, her sleepless nights, the loneliness that came from always being needed but never known. Elise listened too, her gaze softening each time Mara spoke. It was quiet, slow, inevitable, the way something fragile begins to grow even when both people know it shouldn't. The rain had turned insistent that evening, hammering against the city like a relentless heartbeat. Mara left the hospital later than usual, tired to her bones, but something had pulled her toward the cafe, toward Elise. The streetlights reflected in puddles, turning asphalt into a river of gold and silver. She held her coat tighter around herself, half to ward off the cold, half to steady the nervous energy growing in her chest. Elise was already there when Mara arrived, sitting at their usual corner table. Her coat draped elegantly over the chair, damp strands of hair clinging to her pale cheeks. She looked up as Mara approached, and for a moment, the world fell away, the rain, the street, even Mara's exhaustion, until all that existed was the gray intensity of Elise's eyes. Late, Elise said softly, a trace of mock accusation in her tone. Mara shook her head, sliding into the chair opposite her. You're here every evening. I just follow my instincts. Elise smiled faintly, though her eyes held a kind of cautious wariness. Instincts can be dangerous. Mara wanted to argue. Instead, she reached across the table, her hand brushing Elise's almost by accident. The touch lingered, subtle, electric, impossible to ignore. Elise froze, her breath catching. Then, slowly, her hand moved to meet Mara's, fingertips touching in a question, in a fragile bridge over the distance between them. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Elise said, "Don't do this." Mara's fingers tightened slightly. Do what? Love me. Or whatever this is. Mara smiled softly, a tremor in her lips. I already do. The words hung between them, heavy and unavoidable. Elise's gaze faltered, the first crack in her carefully maintained barrier. They left the cafe together, walking beneath the relentless rain. Neither carried an umbrella this time. They let the water soak through their coats, the chill heightening the electricity in the space between them. They ended up at Elise's apartment, a narrow building tucked between a laundromat and an abandoned bookstore. The door opened into a small living room, crowded with stacks of sheet music, old books, and the faint smell of incense. The apartment was quiet except for the rain, and Mara felt an immediate sense of intimacy, as though crossing this threshold meant stepping into the most vulnerable parts of each other's lives. Elise moved toward the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys. I haven't played in weeks, she admitted. Her voice was low, fragile. Mara watched her, sitting on the edge of the couch, the sound of the rain filling the silence between them. Then Elise began to play, not beautifully, not perfectly, but honestly. Each note trembled with emotion, carrying loss, longing, and an ache that Mara could feel deep in her chest. When the last note lingered, Elise turned toward her, eyes searching. She was closer now, and Mara could feel the warmth radiating from her, the tension of unsaid words pressing against them both. Without thinking, Mara reached out, brushing a damp strand of hair from Elise's face. Their lips met then, slow, questioning, desperate, like a confession neither of them had dared speak aloud. It was not gentle, it was urgent and tremulous, the kind of first kiss that carries the weight of months or years of longing compressed into a single moment. Elise's hands moved to Mara's shoulders, tentative at first, then firmer as the walls she had built began to crumble. Mara's arms circled Elise's waist, drawing her closer, as though holding her might keep her from disappearing entirely. When they finally pulled back, rain dripping from their coats, neither spoke. Words would have been inadequate. Instead, they sat together, breathing in the same quiet, broken rhythm, the city outside blurred in silver, the piano silent, and the rain like a soft, unyielding witness to the beginning of something they both knew might not last. That night, Mara didn't sleep. She replayed every glance, every brush of fingers, every tremor in Elise's voice. She knew, deep down, that this love was dangerous, that it would leave her hollow if she surrendered completely. But something in her heart refused to stop, refused to obey reason. Some instincts, she realized, were stronger than logic, and sometimes, you fall anyway, fully aware that the ground might vanish beneath you. For weeks, Mara and Elise lived in a fragile rhythm that belonged to neither day nor night. Mornings were Mara's domain, hospital corridors, flickering fluorescent lights, and the low hum of life and death decisions. Nights belonged to Elise, quiet apartments, sheet music stacked like fragile towers, and the soft sound of rain tapping against window panes. And in between, there was always each other, waiting in the muted glow of the cafe or under the street lamps that made puddles shimmer gold. Their love was unspoken for the most part, a slow-burning current carried in glances, in the brush of hands, in the way Elise's shoulder would lean into Mara's when no one was watching. Words were unnecessary, the silence itself was intimate, sacred even. Elise had begun playing the piano again, though only for Mara, and only when she knew no one else was listening. The music was different now, jagged at times, delicate at others, always honest. Mara would sit on the edge of the couch, tracing the curve of Elise's hand as she moved over the keys, learning the subtle tension of her muscles, the sigh that came after each chord. "You're dangerous," Elise said one night, her voice barely above a whisper. Mara paused. "I like dangerous." Elise shook her head, a sad smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "No. I mean me. I'm dangerous for you. I'm broken." Mara leaned forward, pressing her forehead gently to Elise's. "We're both broken," she said softly. "Maybe that's why it fits." And for a moment, it did. But love, even fragile, quiet love, cannot exist in a vacuum. Elise's past began to surface like shadows at dusk. Sometimes she would stare out the window for hours, her expression distant, and Mara could hear the catch in her breath, the echo of someone who had loved too deeply and lost everything. "Tell me," Mara said one evening, as the rain streaked the glass in thick rivulets. "Tell me about her." Elise's fingers froze above the piano keys. "You don't want." Elise's hands fell into her lap, trembling slightly. She closed her eyes and spoke, her voice low, brittle. "She was everything. My music, my life, my soul. I thought we were forever. But she left. And when she left, she took the colors with her. The notes became gray. The world, gray." Mara felt a lump rise in her throat. She wanted to reach for Elise, to hold her close and promise her safety, but she knew it would not be enough. Not for the past. Not for the absence that haunted Elise's heart. Instead, she just sat there, letting the rain and silence fill the room between them. Their nights together became a delicate balance, moments of closeness, whispers, and gentle touches, punctuated by Elise's sudden withdrawals into shadows. Mara tried not to take it personally, though sometimes it burned like fire in her chest. "You can't fix me," Elise said one night, tracing Mara's jawline with a trembling finger. "I'm not meant to be fixed." "I'm not here to fix you," Mara replied. "I'm here to stay." And Elise smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Not entirely. The first cracks began to appear in the safety of their routine. One rainy afternoon, Mara arrived at Elise's apartment to find her sitting on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, sheet music scattered around like fallen leaves. A bottle of wine lay empty beside her. "Elise," Mara knelt, gently brushing her hair from her face. "What happened?" Elise laughed softly, bitterly. "Nothing. Everything. I just I can't do it all at once. Love, hope, remembering, forgetting, it's too much. You're too much. You're not too much, Mara said, pressing a kiss to the top of Elise's head. You're everything. And I'm here, no matter what. Elise leaned into her, trembling. Promise me, she whispered. Promise me you'll survive this. If I can't. Mara held her tighter. I promise. But don't talk like that. And for a while, the rain outside seemed to soften, the world narrowing to the two of them, hearts beating in fragile unison. It had been 3 days since Elise vanished. Mara's phone sat on the kitchen counter, silent. No messages, no calls, no trace. The cafes, the streets, the rain-slicked sidewalks, she searched all of it, her heart tightening with every passing hour. By the third evening, exhaustion and dread pressed on her chest like a weight. Mara returned to Elise's apartment, fumbling with her keys, and found the door slightly ajar. Elise? Her voice was low, careful, carrying both fear and hope. The apartment was empty. Sheet music lay scattered across the floor, a few chairs pushed askew, as if someone had left in a hurry. Mara's pulse raced. Her mind spun with every possibility: accident, betrayal, escape. And then, from the corner, she heard a faint voice. Mara. Elise emerged from the shadows, wrapped in a coat, hair damp and tangled, eyes hollow and distant. Where have you been? Mara asked, stepping forward, her voice trembling. Elise didn't answer immediately. She sank onto the couch, staring at the floor. I saw her, she said finally. Mara froze. Who? The one I told you about, Elise whispered. Her hands twisted in her lap. She's back. Mara's stomach dropped. Back? How? Why? Elise's gaze lifted, meeting Mara's, and in it was a mixture of fear, longing, and shame. Married now. Happily married. But I saw her. And it destroyed everything I thought I could have with anyone else. Mara felt the cold seep into her bones. She had known that Elise's past was heavy, that some wounds never truly healed, but hearing it, the truth, shattered the fragile foundation she had been building in her mind. You're seeing her again? Mara asked, barely a whisper. Elise shook her head, a tear tracing her cheek. No. I needed to see that it's really over. That it's gone. And then. I came back to you, because you're the only thing that feels real. Mara's hands shook, and for a moment she felt the urge to run, to leave, to protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak. But she didn't. She sat down beside Elise, taking her hands in hers. Why didn't you tell me? Mara asked softly. I was afraid, Elise admitted. Afraid you'd leave. Afraid you'd hate me for being broken. For being a shadow of what I was. Mara squeezed her hands. I don't hate you. I never could. But. Elise, I need to know, am I just a replacement? Elise's eyes glistened with tears. She reached up, cupping Mara's face with trembling fingers. No. You're the only one who makes me feel alive now. But I'm still haunted, Mara. Haunted by her, by what I lost, by everything I can't fix. For a long time, they sat in silence, the rain drumming against the window, echoing the turmoil in Mara's chest. Finally, Elise whispered, almost to herself, I don't deserve you. I'll never deserve you. Mara leaned in, pressing her forehead to Elise's. Then let's stop thinking about deserving. Let's just be. For now. Elise nodded, but Mara could see the cracks in her smile, the shadows lingering behind her eyes. Love had returned, fragile and beautiful, but it was a love threatened by ghosts that would not leave quietly. Spring had arrived late that year, but the rain never stopped. It poured like grief unending, slicking the streets, washing the city in silver and gray. Mara walked beneath the streetlights, hands shoved deep into her coat pockets, heart heavy with a quiet dread she could no longer name. Elise had become more distant in the past weeks, sudden withdrawals, long silences, eyes that sometimes seemed to look through her. Mara knew the warning signs, yet she couldn't leave. She wouldn't leave. That night, Elise's apartment smelled faintly of wine and old paper, the piano silent for the first time in months. Mara found her curled on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, empty bottles scattered around like fallen leaves. Her face was pale, and her eyes were dark rings of exhaustion and sorrow. Elise, Mara knelt beside her, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. What happened? Elise's laugh was soft, bitter, hollow. Nothing, everything. I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend that the past isn't here, that it hasn't destroyed me. You don't have to pretend with me, Mara whispered, pressing her hand to Elise's trembling shoulder. I'm here. I've always been here. Elise shook her head slowly. It's too late. I've lived too long in the shadow of her absence, and now I don't even know how to live without it. Mara's chest tightened. Then let me help you. Please. Elise's eyes, wet and hollow, met hers one last time. I'm sorry, she whispered. I love you. I do. But I can't fight the weight of everything I've lost. I can't be the person you need me to be. Before Mara could respond, Elise slipped from her grasp, moving toward the piano. Her hands hovered above the keys for a moment, trembling, then rested, motionless. Don't go, Mara pleaded, her voice breaking. Elise's hand fell to her lap, and she leaned back against the piano bench. I'm already gone, she said softly. I just didn't have the strength to leave sooner. Mara's heart constricted, a sharp, unbearable pain she could not name. She tried to reach for her, to hold her close, to pull her back from the edge, but it was too late. Hours later, Mara found her still at the piano, eyes closed, face serene as if she had finally surrendered to the weight she carried alone. The doctors later said it was her heart, too weak, too burdened, too broken. Mara knew the truth. It wasn't just her heart. It was grief. It was sorrow. It was a love that had burned too brightly and left nothing but silence. Years passed. Mara never stopped carrying her. The cafe on Wren Street had changed hands several times. The city had grown, evolved, yet the rain remained, constant, patient, unforgiving. Mara returned there sometimes, sat by the same window, and remembered the woman who had changed everything in 3 brief, impossible months. Sometimes she thought she saw Elise walking down the street, a flash of red in the gray. But it was only memory, reflection, a trick of the wet city streets. Mara never loved again. She tried, in fleeting moments, but nothing could compete with the shadow of that first touch, the ghost of a love that was both sanctuary and storm. Some loves end with heartbreak. Hers ended with silence. And with the sound of rain that never stopped. Because some loves are meant to burn, not to last. And some hearts, no matter how brave, can only survive by remembering what they have lost. Turn on notifications bell to never miss a story. Share your thoughts in the comments, we love hearing from our viewers.